Some of the worst disasters in human history were not caused by nature. They were not earthquakes, not hurricanes, not volcanoes. They were caused by us, not by evil masterminds or war, but by small decisions, ignored warnings, and systems that were never supposed to fail. And the most terrifying part is this: many of them were completely preventable. Some of these catastrophes were buried in history. Others were overshadowed by bigger events, and some were simply forgotten. But for the people who lived through them, they were never forgotten. Tonight, we're going to look at some of the darkest man-made disasters you've probably never heard of. Disasters that killed silently, spread invisibly, and destroyed entire communities. And every one of them began with the same illusion, that everything was under control. Our first story takes us to India, to one of the deadliest industrial disasters ever recorded, Bhopal, December 1984. Most people were asleep when it began. Families were inside their homes. The streets were quiet. The city felt safe. But sometime after midnight, something went terribly wrong. A pesticide plant began leaking a highly toxic gas. At first, no one noticed, but then the gas started spreading. It moved through the streets like an invisible wave, hugging the ground, slipping into homes, into lungs, into lives. People woke up coughing, choking, unable to breathe. Their eyes burned, their throats closed. Panic spread faster than the gas itself. Some tried to run, some collapsed where they stood, and many never understood what was happening. By the time the sun rose, thousands were already dead, and tens of thousands more were injured. Even today, the exact number is still debated, but everyone agrees on one thing: it was catastrophic. And what makes Bhopal even more disturbing is this: the disaster didn't come out of nowhere. The plant had known safety issues. Warnings had been ignored. Maintenance had been reduced to cut costs. Safety systems had been turned off. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Bhopal wasn't just an accident. It was the result of human choices that put profit above safety. And those choices cost thousands of lives. But Bhopal was not the only place where invisible danger changed everything. Our next story comes from Japan, and unlike Bhopal, this disaster did not happen in a single night. It happened slowly, silently, over years. This was Minamata, a quiet coastal town where people lived simple lives, fishing, cooking, eating what they caught. For generations, nothing seemed out of place, but nearby, a factory had been releasing industrial waste into the water, and that waste contained something deadly: methylmercury, a powerful neurotoxin. At first, no one noticed. The water looked normal. The fish looked normal. Life went on, but slowly, the poison began to spread. It entered the fish, and then it entered the people. Families ate what they had always eaten. They had no reason to suspect that their food had become toxic. Then the symptoms began. Small at first: shaking hands, difficulty walking, slurred speech. And then it got worse: loss of vision, loss of control, paralysis. Entire families were affected. Children were born with severe neurological damage. And still, the full truth took years to be acknowledged. This wasn't a sudden disaster. It was something far more terrifying: a slow-motion catastrophe, one that people were living inside without even knowing it. And by the time it was understood, it was already too late. Then there is a name that almost everyone has heard: but not everyone fully understands. Chernobyl? Most people remember it as a nuclear explosion, but the reality is more complex and more disturbing. Chernobyl was not just a failure of technology. It was a failure of decisions. A safety test was being conducted, but the reactor had already entered an unstable state. Warnings appeared, but they were ignored. Procedures were bypassed. Confidence replaced caution. And then, in seconds, everything went wrong. The reactor became unstable. Pressure built up, and then came the explosion. A blast that released massive amounts of radioactive material into the environment. But the explosion was only the beginning. The real disaster was what came after. Radiation spread across entire regions. Invisible, silent, deadly. Firefighters arrived without knowing what they were facing. Workers stayed at their posts, trying to contain something they could not see. Entire towns were evacuated, homes abandoned, lives left behind, and the impact lasted for decades. Even today, parts of the area remain uninhabitable. Chernobyl is often remembered as a nuclear disaster, but at its core, it was something else, a chain of human errors, a system pushed beyond its limits, and decisions that ignored the risks. What connects all of these disasters is not just tragedy, it's something deeper. They were all preventable. They were not caused by nature. They were caused by human systems that failed, by warnings that were ignored, by risks that were underestimated, and by the belief that nothing would go wrong. But something always can, and sometimes it does. These stories are not just about the past. They are reminders that progress comes with responsibility, that complex systems require caution, and that small mistakes can lead to massive consequences. Because the truth is, our world is more fragile than it seems, and the line between control and disaster is often thinner than we think.